He was the Pope who refused the palace, rode in a Ford Focus, and embraced the outcast. But he also became one of the most controversial figures in the modern church history. Today, we reflect on the life and legacy of Pope Francis, a man who reshaped the papacy forever. When Jorge Mario became Pope Francis in year 2013, he was already breaking traditions. The first Jesuit Pope, the first from Latin America, and the first non-European Pope in over 1300 years. But it wasn't just where he came from, it was what he stood for. He spurned the Vatican's luxury, opted for humility over hierarchy, and began a mission to make Catholic Church more inclusive and less judgmental. From embracing migrants and washing the feet of Muslims to saying, "Who am I to judge?" about the LGBTQ community, Francis brought a softer, more compassionate face to a centuries old institution. But that compassion came at a price. Conservatives within the church, especially in the United States of America, saw him as a radical threat. They accused him of turning the church into, and I quote, ship without a rudder. Some even called him a precursor to the Antichrist. He was criticized for allowing blessings for same-sex couples, cracking down on the Latin Mass, and giving women senior roles in the Vatican City. But his response, always calm, prayerful, even when he eventually stripped his critics of their titles and privileges. Francis tried to be a global peacemaker as well, from appeals in Ukraine and Gaza to championing nuclear disarmament. Yet, despite his calls for peace, he couldn't end the war in Ukraine, a failure he admitted weighed heavily on him. He tackled scandals head on head, from child abuse cover-ups to Vatican financial corruption. He fired powerful cardinals and called historic meetings to clean up the church. But even with bold reforms, critics and victims groups say it wasn't enough. During the pandemic, Francis stood alone in an empty St. Peter's Square and urged the world to reflect. He said the crisis was a chance for greater reset, to narrow the gap between rich and poor. He also built bridges between Islam, becoming the first pope to visit the Arabian Peninsula and later war-torn Iraq. Conservatives called it heresy, he called it brotherhood. From a working-class family in Buenos Aires to leading 1.3 billion Catholics, his journey was never predictable. Neither was his papacy. Loved by many, criticized by others, Pope Francis will be remembered not just for what he changed, but for what he desired and dared to question. A spiritual leader, a reformer, a disruptor, and perhaps the most human pope of our time.